In this video, we're going to discuss the various parts of a bass guitar and why they might matter to you. Well, first, they matter because as a beginner, you're going to need to know what your instructor's talking about. When he throws these keywords at you, you're going to want to know where to go, or when the instructional video talks about it, or you know, whatever music software you're using, you're going to need to know where to go to make the adjustments, or what topic is being discussed. So to understand that lesson, you're going to need to know the names of these things. You're also going to need to know the names of these things when you're trying to troubleshoot problems that you're having. If you're getting a lot of fret buzz and the instructional video starts talking about where to make the changes, you're going to need to know where to go. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. If you're building your own project guitar, you're definitely going to need to know all the names of the things so you know what parts to buy, and you know why that you need to know why they matter, and the different various materials, qualities, brands. You're going to need to make comparisons of those. So knowing the names of the parts will help you. And when choosing what bass to buy, not maybe necessarily as a beginner, but definitely as an intermediate to advanced player, you're going to need to know the differences, so you know how to compare. Okay, the features on this bass are actually significantly better than the ones on those, and the differences in materials and styles and shapes and sizes all affect whether or not what bass you should buy and are going to want to buy. So knowing the names is sort of the first step in going down that road and doing your research. So I'm not going to get too deep into the woods on this. I'm not going to get too scientific. I probably may get a little more long-winded than you like, and I apologize for that. I know in general this can be a boring subject. I certainly thought it was when I was beginning. Now I find it all extremely, extremely interesting. The more obsessed and the more I learn, the more I want to learn. So hopefully this falls into that category for you and is helpful for you. I want to thank the Vault Music arts.com. I said that wrong the first time I tried to make this video. The whole reason I'm remaking it is that I called it music charts. It's musicarts.com. I'm going to provide a link in the description. Please, please, please visit their website. They have just tons and tons of really cool charts. Um, I chose this one because it mentioned a part that was missing and another one that was a little more at my fancy. This isn't particularly a Fender bass, and I wanted to show a Fender. This one looks more like a Peavey to me, but I could be wrong. And they've purposely scratched off the logo there on the headstock to keep them from getting into trouble. So hopefully I won't get in trouble with the vault.musicarts.com, because we're sort of asking permission later, doing and asking permission later. But we're going to try to drive as much traffic to them as possible. So hopefully they will appreciate the fact that we use their chart rather than be upset by it. That's my hope and wish there. If wishes were horses, we all would ride, right? So let's talk about the body first. The body is obviously a huge main part of the bass. Hopefully it's made out of wood. Some older ones were made out of weird materials. A lot of them were like coated in vinyl back in the 50s. That was kind of weird. I can't remember the particular name of it, but I was researching it. It was interesting. Thought about buying it just for the oddity of it, but apparently it's a horrible playing bass, so I didn't. The type of wood that matters definitely affects tonal quality. In the beginning, beggars really can't be choosers because price point, and you want to get the best quality you can where it's not a toy anymore, and it's an actual instrument, but you don't want to spend so much that it's a complete waste of money if you don't end up playing it right away. My hope is that even if you pick it up, start playing it and go, my fingers hurt too much, or it's too much work and effort, I have no time for it. Put it up on a wall, put it in a corner, see it every day. The more you see it, the more you'll be inspired to pick it up and play it. If you just stick it into a closet, you're never going to learn it, and it's going to get beat up and abused. So put it somewhere you can see it. Be reminded of it. One, they're very, very pretty, and two, that'll help inspire you down the future to play. Certainly, it was advice I was given, followed, and when the 10 or plus or so times I stopped and started before I finally became truly committed to it, being able to see it every day was always I always look at it and went, wow, man, I really need to dedicate some time to play that. I need to man up, cowboy up, and fight through the pain. Also, a big beginner's tip, a little off topic. In the beginning, limit how much you play each day. 10, 15 minutes is enough at first. yeah, you're not really learning anything. You're just familiarizing yourself with the bass, but most importantly, you're building up calluses. After the first 2 weeks, your fingers should be tough enough, as long as you're doing it every single day, that you can start playing 30 minutes a day. Do that for a couple of weeks. So now if you're doing 30 minutes a day, now man up and start doing, an hour and plus and really getting a real practice out of it. By then your fingers will be tough enough where your fingers just won't be completely on fire the next day. If you mess up and your fingers are on fire, too damn bad, pick it up and play it again. The only way you're ever going to get good is if you play every single day. I understand church on Sunday, whatever, but you know, that one day you take off soon becomes 2, 3, 10, 30, 40. Suddenly it's a year before you played. So again, body, the type of wood matters, both in, you know, what it affects tone. So now it matters for when you're choosing your next bass. Also deciding between basses, maybe the shape and contour, the ergonomics of it, that cannot be underestimated, the value and importance of that. It needs to fit your body in order for you to enjoy playing. Let's start near the back here. Let's keep going rather than focusing on, whether it's a huge main part of the bass. They're all important main parts of the bass. The bridge and the saddles. The saddles are the um, little round, I don't know, Tootsie Roll shaped things that hold your strings and also control how high your action is, which is this height of the strings off the deck and neck. They control how far out those saddles are on that bridge, affect intonation. And intonation determines whether or not your tuning is actually true all the way throughout the neck or just, whatever open string you're playing. So all the notes to the neck, are they all in tune? That is largely affected by these saddles. Not only affected by it, but largely affected by the quality of the neck, and the adjustment of the truss rods will also come into play. Although they play a much bigger role in your action, which is the height. The truss rod, the shape of the neck is controlled by a truss rod, a rod that runs down into the neck. All of that works together to control your action, your intonation. Okay, so the materials that your bridge is made out of, the better quality metal it is, the better tone you're going to get, the better quality it is. And the adjustments and stuff are going to be easier to make the better quality that it is. The heavier the mass of it will affect tone and quality. There's nothing wrong with the little cheapy bent style Fender ones that come on every Fender until you hit the professional level and above. But there's a reason the professional level above have sort of adopted a high mass style um, bridge there. And if you have a project bass, upgrading that might be something to look at. It might even be a helping deciding factor. One more plus in the plus column, one more check in the plus column for a bass if you're deciding between two of them. Next up, the pickups, hugely important towards sound. The beginning level ones are going to be rather dull, lifeless, and have a very, very limited range. Um, that's fine at the beginning level. It makes sense because again, you want an instrument that's playable. It doesn't need to be recording studio quality or recording studio money. Because that would be a complete waste for you. You don't know your commitment level yet. Your playing doesn't justify it yet. So, but just know, as the reason one bass might cost significantly more than another, even though they look the same, largely has to do with the quality of pickups that are in there. The pickups work together with the wiring harness that is hidden underneath here, and all the wires. There's a ground wire that runs into a little cavity inside the body here. There's the wires that control your, you know, this particular pickup in the rear runs through the body with this style bass. These are jazz style pickups, by the way. The front will have wiring, and then there'll be a big cavity here underneath your pick guard, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But the knobs, your jack, your ground wire, the wires, and the wires will be attached to, usually the wires that go to your pickups come with the pickups, and then you will solder those, or those are soldered to your wiring harness, which is your volume knobs, your tone knobs, and your output jack, as well as the capacitors and stuff that are wired to it that will affect sound. If you've got preamps, that'll be down underneath here as well. And then on the back, hopefully, There'll be a wiring compartment to it. Aftermarket pre-up sometimes will come where you're gonna have to stash, where you're gonna have to stash your battery underneath the pickguard, and you may have to even carve out some wood for that. I don't like those. I don't. If you got a passive bass, leave it passive, in my personal opinion. But again, that's just personal opinion. So volume knobs. In this particular case of jazz, um, each pickup has its own volume knob. Precision basses and some other basses will only have one volume knob, even though you physically see, split coil two pickups. These are single coil pickups. They have posts. The posts are little magnets that have wires wrapped around them, and that generates the electronic signal as the metal string moves across the top of them. That generates your signal. The better designs and the better designed these are, and the better quality they are, and the better materials and metals used, um, the better tone you're going to get. And even within those better tones, slight differences in those designs will give you different types of sounds. So that's why even within the same price range, some aftermarket stuff, you're going to see lots of different models because they're designed to give you different sounds. So like the Seymour Duncans will have, an SP1, SP2, SP3. I've got SP3s in my project bass. Um, it affects the difference in design or as intentional design differences to get you different tones. Same goes with, different Fenders, right? My Fender Road Worn has style pickups designed to sound like the 60s. They used back then and are tuned very differently than basses that cost the same amount of money from Fender because they're just trying to give a different character to that particular bass. It's a specialty bass. Um, there's a cover plate. Of course, in this case, sometimes your cover plate is really like, especially a PJ or a P bass. Either one of those is going to have your cover plates basically built into the pickguard and it's plastic. The cover plate's covering a hole where all of that wiring harness and electronics and stuff are hidden. Sometimes it's not shielded underneath there, so a major upgrade if you're getting humming is to take all this apart. Just pull it off very gently without pulling too hard on the wires after you restring your bass, and then take some shielding tape, watch a video on YouTube so you can see, where to make sure that you have tape and make sure that you don't have tape because, maybe you'll accidentally ground something out and get a whole bunch of noise rather than reduce it. But yeah, caring about pickups definitely is important when upgrading or choosing a new bass. Not necessarily so much when you're choosing your first bass, unless maybe you're deciding between, okay, I've decided I'm going to get Squier Affinity Series because it's entry level, but do I get the PJ model or do I get the J model? Maybe then what style pickups will matter, but probably more the ergonomics of it will come into play. But the different styles of music you like could be, maybe the P would be better for that. Or maybe just, like I said, the ergonomics, maybe a J will fit your body better because it's designed to be more ergonomical. Or maybe just your particular body, that isn't the case. Maybe you're, tall and the PJ actually fits you better. Who knows? Long fingers. PJ's the PJ model has a wider neck, as do all P series basses, or most of them, anyways. Strap post, or we talked about pickguard. Again, sometimes the pickguard covers the entire control panel. Sometimes there's actually, a cover plate for that. Pickguards are sometimes very, very easy to replace. In the case of the jazz basses, you just unscrew it. Nothing is physically connected to it, so you can just put a new one down. So long as you don't strip the wood, constantly changing out your pickguard, you can upgrade your pickguard pretty easily. On a P or PJ bass, that is not the case. The stuff is physically mounted, especially the control knobs. Maybe in some basses, your pickups will even be mounted to the pickguard. So in some basses, it's very difficult to replace that without potentially pulling a wire loose. So whether or not you should upgrade or not is tricky. On some cases, there, especially with the Fender lines, there'll be differences in the shapes of the pickup or pickguard based upon whether or not it's made in China, whether or not it's made in Mexico, whether or not it's made in the USA. So that will matter. Or made in Japan. The Japan ones are different shape than some others. I found the Japan ones actually fit pretty well amongst other styles than just Japan, where sometimes the made in Mexico ones the holes won't totally line up. There's nothing wrong with tapping it and putting a new hole in there. I wouldn't just put the screw in there and then screw down as tightly as you can. Do not use a power drill. Use hand drills with the correct size bit and tap it rather than drill it with a power drill. Last thing you need to do is break off a drill bit head in there, and now you're totally hosed. Um, strings affect your sound considerably. The better quality strings, the better sound you get. My personal preference, Ernie Ball Super Slinkies. If you focused on the words Ernie Ball and Slinky, know that Super Slinkies are much more slinky than regular Slinkies. I prefer round to flat wound, just personal preference more than anything else. Neck. Your neck and headstock are sort of all in one, but they get referred to, the headstock gets talked about separately. The quality materials used there will definitely affect the tone that you get. The quality and how precise to the spec the neck is will affect whether or not you're even capable of adjusting it so that you can get a really low action or not. So, that's something to consider. And it's one of the main reasons why, um, the made in China one is a lot cheaper than the made in Mexico one, which is a lot cheaper than the made in the USA one, will be the quality of the neck and the adjustability of it and the attention to detail that gets there, but also huge difference in the electronics package as you go up the various scales. And I know I'm very Fender centric here only because that's a good example of a huge wide range of products. And then talking that sort of language, talking about the brands and models, the more you get into basses, that's something sort of everyone knows. But there's nothing wrong with other brands as well. This applies to other brands as well. Fingerboard or fretboard. Sometimes this is the same material as the neck, other times it is a thin layer of wood put on top. Often that thin layer of wood is made out of rosewood. That rosewood is getting harder to find, so sometimes it'll be pau ferro or something that is easier to source. And I'm not sure if pau ferro grows back quicker. I think it does. I think it's kind of like bamboo in the sense that it's easier to replenish a faster growing tree. But I could be wrong about that. If I am, I apologize. The whole purpose behind switching materials, though, isn't looks as much as environmentalism. Frets. Frets matter. The different style of frets out there, whether they're medium width, thin, fat, whether they're tall or low, that will affect how easy it is for you to play what type of style music you want. For example, a lot of people that play slap, I've heard them say, because I am not someone who's very good at that, I research it and keep trying to perfect that skill, but that seems to be a long way off. Um, Slap players tend to prefer, so I'm told, based upon what many of them have said, a thinner, taller fret. Whereas maybe with other styles of play, that might be a little buzzier for you. So maybe that's not something you prefer. I'm just sort of, supplementing, guessing there. The nut, the type of material that the nut is made out of, will affect the tone that you get. Higher end basses often use bone. Um, Cheaper basses use plastic. And that's not always the case. There are some higher end basses using plastic or plastic like materials, and they'll have justification for doing so rather than using bone. Some use metal, various types of metal over the years. You don't see it as often today as you did back in the 80s and earlier, but they're out there. Um, I'm going to go back to strap post in the end. String guide. This is important. This affects intonation quite a bit and whether or not your bass will stay in tune. The angle of attack of your strings, both up and here in front, right? For the shorter ones, they don't need it. For the longer ones, they do. Pushing those strings down at a proper angle from the nut. Same thing matters back here at the saddles, which is part of the bridge. When you restring it, you're going to want to push down on the front of it and then retune and push down a little bit and then retune. You don't want to just strap them on there, tune them up and think you're done because keeping it in tune over time matters and that helps you do so. The angle of attack on both ends of the string matters. Headstock. The shape of it will help you determine whether or not a bass is real or not. Fender has a very distinct headstock. The shape, details of it all come into play to help you identify what bass it is, right? These are all copywritten headstocks. A lot of companies that used the shapes or too similar of a shape to another company will get sued. Mainly you just care about it because it holds um, the tuning pegs and it holds the string guide. Um, and the design of it may affect the angle at which these strings are placed, which may affect how well it stays in tune and the intonation of the bass based upon how it shapes and pulls those strings at the correct angles. Tuning pegs. The quality of these definitely matters as you improve in basses. The quality of the tuning pegs will matter. They'll be easier to tune, not a whole bunch of adjusting back and forth. Maybe they won't slip as much. That said, if you have an inexpensive bass that is slipping, look on the back of it, especially on Squiers. There'll be a big Phillips head style, bolt right in the middle of them. Tightening that down will affect whether or not they slip or not. Or if they're too hard to adjust, loosening that up may affect it, as well as, a little bit of oil in there may loosen it up as well. Um, so, something to consider. They may not necessarily need to be replaced just because they're not functioning properly. They might just need to be taken apart, cleaned, or adjusted. Um, so even the so-called crappy ones, um, if you got a really used pawn shoppy one, or maybe it just wasn't properly, the quality control wasn't properly assembled, tightened down, and tuned properly. Not tuned as in tuning sound, but fine tuning how tight or loose something is might affect that. That said, in a project base, for example, this would be among after the pickups would probably be something you'd consider upgrading because you want to get something a little better quality. And I personally prefer the Hipshot ones. This is a good chance to talk about the Hipshot extender. On your E string, your lowest, fattest string, they make a drop tuner that has a little lever on it. And so, like if you're tuned to E standard, maybe you want to be able to, maybe a lot of your other songs are drop D, and you don't have to pick up another bass if you're gigging. You just throw the lever. Actually, it hangs down. When it's closed, it's hanging down, and when it's open, it's facing straight back. And you basically just pull on it to open it, and now you're tuned to, a lower tuning. And you can choose whether that's D or, the difference between the two tunings, whether closed or open. You can adjust that so it's not just a drop D tuner, it's a drop whatever tuner you want to make it to be. So that's a common upgrade to upgrade that, even if you're going to keep your other tuners. So for a project bass, you might do that. And even if it's not just a project bass, I put one of these on my Music Man Stingray, which is perfect the way it is, but this adds just a slight bit of functionality to it. Okay, as promised, we're going to talk about the strap post or strap buttons. If you're going to well, first, if you're going to use these like they are with just a regular strap, bear in mind, be very, very gentle pulling your straps on and off of it because the more pressure you put on there, there's a little screw in here that's screwing straight into wood and it will very, especially on cheaper bases, pull itself loose. So what I recommend doing, well, if that happens, you have to do something that they say never, never do. You have to add a little Elmer's glue and screw that in there. And so, luthiers, which are guitar mechanics, are freaking out that I said that. But that's pretty much the only way to fix it is to add some glue. I recommend, especially if you're going to do so, that you upgrade your strap posts to strap locks. But no matter what, I recommend upgrading to strap locks. But it's a perfect excuse if you stripped a screw to make that upgrade now that you're going to glue it in place and make it permanent. And I highly, highly recommend that you not cheap out on those and that you go with the Ernie Ball Super Locks. They're much easier to get on and off. And when you go to test them and tug on them to check to see that they're actually secured, um, they're not lying to you. They're not going to feel like they're locked when they're not. So you're not going to, be convinced that it's secure in place and then still end up dropping your bass and cracking your body. And that's the big reason you'd want strap locks is over time, straps will wear out and wear themselves out, and now they'll slip right off your bass. A cheaper option, there's a very functional option, but again, you risk, if you're changing them out a lot, you risk stripping the wood of your body and pulling the screw out. are these little rubber washers with a really tiny hole in the center that you stretch out in order to fit over that strap lock, but a strap button. But once it's in place, that sucker does not want to come off, and you may, trying to get it off, damage your base by stripping that screw. So that's why I prefer strap locks. The other thing I prefer about strap locks is if you order a bunch of them, they're not too expensive, 20 bucks or so for a set, and they come with each one set you buy comes with different buttons. So you have a bunch of extra buttons should you ever buy more bases. But I buy a bunch of them and stick them on every strap I own. That way I can change my straps like I change my underwear, just constantly change that sucker out, for however you feel. Maybe when you're practicing, you don't like the big, heavy, padded one. You want something just light. But when you're going to go gig and stand up in front of people for 8 hours, maybe the weight of the bass requires a padded one. Or maybe like me, just, looks still matter to you. So you've got a bunch of cool different ones and you just get sick of looking at the same one. Well, you want to freshen up the look of your bass, change its socks, change that strap. So that is the discussion of all the various parts of a bass guitar and why you might care about them, and especially with regards to like project basses, upgrading, choosing your next bass, troubleshooting problems that you have with your existing bass, where you might want to look. I believe I talked about truss rod already. That's important. That truss rod is going to be buried in here on this particular bass. On some basses, it's a little tuning little knob there where you insert your Allen key and tune a little bit. If you're going to make, just a forewarning, before you make any changes to this, go watch videos on YouTube on how to do those changes. And if it looks too complicated, go and take it to a luthier. I don't think you should be afraid of adjusting a truss rod, but you could break it pretty easily by just cranking it and thinking, it's mechanical. So if I just crank it, it's fine. Well, no, they're thin and relatively fragile. So tiny little adjustments, right? In a previous video, I said you need to wait like a day. That's an exaggeration, but you need to give it like 30 minutes to an hour for the wood to truly, truly, truly settle. You can adjust it, right, and get it all set up the way you want to the right thickness, and then come back the next day, and now it's way more so than you thought it was, right? It adjusted further than you thought, and that's because wood takes time to change shape. How drastic of a time do you need to wait? That's an excellent question. I'm as lazy as the next guy and impatient as the next guy and don't want to wait the proper amount of time that I should. And then often come back the next day and I need to make a few adjustments, minor adjustments back in the other direction. Or I'm just, lazy and I don't bother doing it because, it's not too far off from where I wanted. But just bear in mind, wood doesn't change shape instantly. It'll change shape. It just won't totally, fully change shape. It's going to change a little bit more than it initially does. So that's something to keep in mind. So anyhow, these are all the parts of a bass. Thank you so much to the vault.musicarts.com and whoever it is that posted this particular chart. We truly, truly appreciate it. Please go visit their site. They have much more detailed information than we do. You would be helping us and helping them by doing so, helping us then that they won't get mad at us for using their artwork here, and helping them by driving up their traffic and having people take advantage of all the very, very useful information they have on their website. Please like, share, subscribe. All three help us considerably.